Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode. On today's show, we're looking at the very odd Fatal Fury Special port on the Sega CD brought to us by JVC back in 1995. You guys know me, I love me some Fatal Fury, and this is a version I have wanted to talk about for quite a while. The thing is, getting a hold of a copy of this game is no easy task, is pretty rare, and it does go for quite a bit these days. Luckily, I was able to score a copy not too long ago, so we can finally sit down with this bad boy and take a deeper look. There are some good things here, and some not so good as well, so let's kick back, knuckle up, and dive right in. The first thing you notice in this version is that the graphics look very large and detailed, but don't let that fool you. There's a ton of animation that's been cut to accommodate these larger sprites, and it definitely trickles down to the gameplay. The game itself feels a bit sluggish, almost like there's a bit of a delay in how the special moves are pulled off. It's something that you sort of can get used to, but when you go back to the arcade version, be it MVS, Neo CD, or AES, or really even the Super Nintendo port, you just notice how much more fluid the game feels, and it's pretty noticeable. Another really weird thing here is the lack of detail in the majority of the backgrounds. All the stages look and feel so empty, being that almost all of the crowds and such have been removed entirely. I like to call this port of Fatal Fury Special the post-apocalyptic version, and it's kinda off-putting honestly, especially on Big Bear and Cheng stages. I mean, where the hell's the seafood boat? You gotta have that. The load times aren't too bad, but would seem a lot shorter if they would have used a more creative loading screen. The black screen with disc access on it definitely doesn't entertain to help pass the time. In between stages, the quick dialogue exchanges before the next fight are formatted incorrectly, and they don't even have any music. Yep, just a silent screen that looks really thrown together right before another disc access screen. No world map in between showing where you're headed next, it's just right into the next fight. That's not to say that it's all bad, even though I'm sure that's what it sounds like so far. One cool feature of the Sega CD Fatal Fury Special is that you get Rio unlocked right from the start, not unlike the good old and pretty impressive Game Gear port. All the characters are present and accounted for, as are all of the stages, well, to a degree, and the music is downright excellent here. Kind of a shame, really. With a few more tweaks and some extra time in the oven, I think this one really could have been a contender. I'm okay with smaller sprites as long as the animation isn't cut back and the feel is there. The problem with this version is that it's just kind of a pain to get through. One really good example of this, if you guys remember, would be Samurai Shodown on the Super NES versus the Sega Genesis. The Super NES version had much smaller sprites, but all of the characters were accounted for, and they did animate quite well. The Genesis version had those larger sprites from the close-up view in the arcade version, and they look really good in still shots, but they don't animate so well, and Earthquake had to be taken out. So, as I had mentioned about a minute ago, the music here is top-notch. I wish I could say the same for the sound effects, though. These obviously come from the Genesis itself and sound super muffled just like they do in Fatal Fury 2. It wouldn't be as noticeable if the music wasn't so good. It's sort of jarring to hear the sound effects cut through the music and kind of take away from the overall presentation. Even still, the use of color here is pretty awesome, and it's amazing in a way that the developers were able to get so much out of such a limited palette, especially compared to the Neo Geo original. It looks pretty close, at least in still shots. To wrap up, Fatal Fury Special is more of a novelty on the Sega CD than a legitimate fighting game. It tries, but just not hard enough to top even the Super Nintendo port. To be honest, in my opinion, the PC Engine arcade CD version of Fatal Fury Special smokes the Sega CD. Granted, that one does require an extra bit of RAM to run via the arcade card, but the funny thing is, you can most likely get the game and the card for less than what you'd pay on average for Fatal Fury Special on Sega CD. The game regularly runs upwards of $150 to $200, which is completely insane. Even the MVS and AES carts on the actual Neo Geo are cheaper. The AI in the game is also kind of, well, for lack of a better term, stupid. They'll come at you full force until you throw a projectile, and when you do, they'll just sort of sit back and eat them over and over. Rinse, repeat, and finish the game. So basically, unless you're one of the world's biggest Fatal Fury Special fans, it's probably best to just not bother with this one and save the cash. Still, it's kinda cool that it even exists, I just wish it was done a little bit better.
As always, guys, I'd like to thank you all for watching, commenting, and of course subscribing. And until next time, stay classic.
Congratulations!